Good afternoon, Bitcoiners. I hope you're doing well. I'm loving my life. Who could complain on an afternoon like this? Peace is breaking out around the world. We're going to have a great time. But those folks in Canada, not so much, weren't really betting on peace. I'm here with the great Dave Bradley to break it all down, indeed. Euphoria around the world, but in Canada, I'm not sure if you noticed, Air Canada's had to cancel all kinds of flights. You can't go to New York City anymore. Who needs to go to New York City? If you're from Canada, it's just a bunch of MAGA extremists anyway, right? Who gives a shit? How you doing, Dave?
I'm good.
Are we enthusiastic? Are we feeling it? Are we feeling the end of Canada? I see it in the notes today. I couldn't believe putting my show notes together today, what we got in store. It's pretty amazing stuff. But whatever timeline you had, it looks like it's time to speed it up because things are moving much, much quicker than all of us thought. So let me just get right into it. First up, all of this is terrible news for Mark Carney. Mark Carney with peace breaking out. If you're under a rock somewhere you didn't notice, it looks like everything in the Middle East is going to go away quietly, and Trump's war against the city of London has been prosecuted with great success, and it looks like he's going to get his way. So the TDS that's about to be incoming is going to be through the roof. One of the first implications of it, and I don't know how he's going to deal with it, is the old speech writing from our favorite Mark Carney. It looks like the old dark and dangerous o'clock is not going to work anymore. What time is it? It's dark and dangerous divided o'clock. So in a world of peace, what's he going to do with his speeches here? If you didn't know, Mark Carney starts every speech these days in a dangerous and divided world. What does all this mean for Mark Carney's pessimism if the whole world turns optimistic?
Yeah, I mean, they're not changing their plans. They're still going with Project Loot Canada till it's dead. That's what they're doing at the moment. And this majority government certainly gives them more ability to do that. It also, probably means that there's not going to be another election.
Yeah, I don't think there is. I think that this is the last parliament and this is the last prime minister that we're looking at here, because they don't have to go with the stolen election. They don't have to go back to the population, even according to the stupid, ridiculous, fake and gay Canadian charter. They still have 4 years to go before they technically have to go back to elections, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, well, and a lot of the stuff that they're trying to push through that they'll now be able to do without, anyone blocking them, is stuff that is really, really anti-democratic. That's designed to really strengthen their hold on power. They want to take control of what's left of the media. They want to silence independent media voices. They want to make sure that, that people like us are not allowed to say the kind of things that we say. And I promise you that if there is a Canada 3 or 4 years from now, that it will be a much less free place than it is today. And it's not a very free place today.
No. And I'll tell you, I had a few thousand views on your clip last week asking someone to sue you for saying that they're looting and scamming, and literally nobody bothered. Haven't heard from them. Oh, I wonder why. So indeed, it's not just Mark Carney's speechwriters that are in for trouble. Indeed, flights here, according to the Globe and Mail, Air Canada. So this just shows betting on the wrong horse has consequences. Imagine a country like Canada with unlimited gasoline. Really, I didn't know there was a limit to our jet fuel. We're not going to be able to fly flights, which probably for the human capital that matters is the most important flight in Canada, the New York City axis between Toronto, Montreal, and JFK. Now, I understand there's other airports. You got LaGuardia and everything, but they simply can't afford the gas. This is pretty funny story. Just breaking before you came online, but imagine, just as peace is being announced, just as we're going to see gas in the United States hit, I mean, unbelievable rock bottom prices are what I predict in the United States. I mean, they're going down to, if you want to convert 50 cents a liter type of thing, we're talking about 50 cents a liter gas incoming here. In America, we're talking about $2 a gallon probably is where we're going to head. And so Canada won't even have enough gas to fly their elite human capital to New York to make money, or just their vacationers who want to spend money in one of the most expensive places in the world won't be able to do it anymore.
Yeah. It's, the first of what I expect will be many sort of like quality of life adjustments that they will be pushing down our throats.
Hold on, they've already started it. It's not just the New York Times, the New York travel to on flights with no gas. Quality of life has already had trouble. Look at this story. The Globe and Mail reluctant to rough it. Retirees are trimming their travel costs. Mr. Robinson said they plan to travel comfortably, looking for centrally located hotels, direct flights, and seat upgrades for long flights. Canadian boomers are roughing it, boy. They're going to have to cut down their European vacations by maybe even 2 weeks. They've been living 6 weeks in Europe. Now they got to go down to 4. Can Canadians handle this? How much of an appetite for pain and poverty do they have, these boomers?
Yeah, that's the question. And how deep is that pain and poverty reaching? Because I can tell you that most Canadians are not in the position where they're spending 4 or 6 weeks in Europe at this point.
Oh.
And
no one's even going to New York. There's no gas. Gas.
So it's a step towards breadlines. It's what you get when you bring in socialism.
Well, the story keeps getting better. So indeed, this is just another one of these examples. And it's what I've been saying for a long time, that the only thing that is going to keep Canada together was their appetite for pain and poverty. But there is the one other factor, and this is the one I think you've been talking about, the plan to loot Canada, which is all based on the TDS. Now, again, here's a story from Gad Sad talking about some of his friends here in Montreal. He said, a degenerate liberal Canadian woman was chatting with my wife, who was telling her that I was currently at something in the States. The woman was writhing in disgusted horror that we would want to be in the United States. According to this gargantuan, hysteric imbecile, the US was indistinguishable from the worst regimes imaginable. I hear this from innumerable liberal Canadians. Imagine being so parasiticized as to think this of the United States. I'm Canadian and proudly proclaim that the US is the greatest country in the history of humanity. So how well is this Trump derangement syndrome still going to play when these economic factors come in? How is this going to play out in the next little while? If we clearly think Trump had an incredible plan to create a lasting and forever peace in the Middle East, and that looks like what he's cooking up. I know a lot of people are, we got to wait and see. There's a Lindy effect here, but everything that he has in place says this will last literally forever. And so if it's true, and if we even get to the autumn, for example, and the peace looks holding and strong, and Trump really does get all of these accolades as one of the great world peacemakers, what's that going to do to the mental illness in Canada? Again, I think only pain and poverty and TDS is what can keep this country together. But will that also run out of fuel? Is that going to be like the Air Canada flights to JFK?
I don't think so. I think that would take a very long time, because Carney and his ilk run on having an enemy. You know what I mean? And I fully expect that as the belts tighten around Canada, and the consequences of our disastrous, out of control spending and our insane foreign policy start to settle with Canadians, that that will be exactly where Carney goes. He's going to blame Trump for all of the problems that he's caused in Canada. And Trump is a perfect counterpoint for him, a perfect enemy, because a lot of Canadians find Trump distasteful. And so it was the easiest win of any election ever when Trump pretty much picked Carney and came out with the 51st state thing. And down to the peace in the Middle East, we've got still this group of people in Europe that don't want peace in the Middle East. They don't want peace in Canada. They don't want peace anywhere. They want war, strife. They want to loot what's left of the Western world, bring in the third world, and replace us. And, Trump seems to be the counterpoint to all of that effort. But these people are not going away just because he got the Strait of Hormuz opened, right? Like they're still going to be agitating. They're still going to be trying to cause war and strife throughout the world. And there's a lot of that left built up over there in the Middle East. So I don't expect we're going to see a forever Middle East peace, but we're taking some bite out of them.
So again, with your enemy thing, and I agree, but part of the problem here is the jig is kind of up. Here you have the U.S. Ambassador Pete Hoekstra saying, this was intentional. So people are aware that Carney is now doing this intentionally. You're seeing the intentionality with this, and Jasmine Lane was interviewing him this week, and he says, no, they deliberately. So at the same time that Trump picked Carney, I think he did it because he knew Carney was going to pick this fight. And the difference here, though, is, again, the trump card that he's got is energy, and it is wealth creation, and it is fighting economics, because, again, pain and poverty only get you so far, and TDS only get you so far. Once you're out of gas, once your European trip is cut down, once you're forced to move out of Canada, once all these other ramifications happen, you're not really in that angle anymore. And that's why we saw this week that it looks like it's only going to get worse. Here's the announcement that Trump did, and I fully expect this is like literally, if you were going to write a storyline, like a wrestling storyline right now, like you hear the glass breaking, and like the NWO people, but you can't say NWO in Canada because you'll get a mark. Even though Mark Carney says it, they'll throw you a thing on YouTube saying that's not what he's talking about. That's what happened to Jasmine Lane with that video with Hoekstra. But NWO entering the conversation, glass breaking, pipelines to Canada. Trump has ordered it. It looks like it's going to happen. Here's Danielle Smith saying, yesterday, the White House approved the advancement of multiple pipeline projects carrying Alberta oil to the United States. Expanding pipeline capacity to the U.S. is something I've been advocating from this U.S. administration since their last election, and has paid off. This is great news for Alberta and Canada. It has the potential to unlock hundreds of billions in energy investment for our province and country. Now, again, the original frame of you and I getting together on these Friday afternoons is this. It is exactly this story here, that this was inevitable, but Canada was designed so that this never needed to actually happen. The point of building East and West and creating Confederation was to avoid this exact scenario. Now, a little bit of oil into the United States, sure, but we're supposed to be able to sell this on either side of the continent to the rest of the world. We're supposed to be able to sell this oil to the Germans or the Chinese or anybody else who wants to come to our ports, not to get vendor lock-in to the United States. That was literally what the shit coining founders of Canada, the railway stock guys, had in mind when they started this country with all of their shit coinery and their railway scams that they all got caught for. So just so people in the audience know, Canada was not founded by like the US founding fathers. It was literally people who wanted to avoid anything like this ever happening because they had their own shitcoin projects to build infrastructure and build east-west in the country, because there was no economic incentive to do it. They had to create the circumstances for it. So here you can see this pipeline story is not just about moving product to Canada, to the United States from Canada. This is the ticking time bomb for the end of Canada, because this gives Alberta the optionality that it needed to say, go fuck yourself, Canada. We're going in a different route.
Yeah. And this has always been on the table. We don't really care where we sell the oil to. We're already selling a massive amount of oil to the United States already. It's just going on trains. So the trains are much more expensive for the oil producers, meaning a lot more of that revenue that comes into the province goes to the transportation companies.
Warren Buffett.
And so this is going to be money directly out of his pocket and into the pocket of Albertans, which can only be a positive. And it'll just expand our economic activity. Our economic base here will be stronger, and we'll need the rest of Canada less than we already do. So.
And of course, the image here, the corollary to the story is not just the north-south pipeline. It's this idea, again, and here's Enbridge saying it's not willing to take on development risk of building a new oil pipeline from Alberta to Canada's west coast. executive said on an earnings call. So here what you see is the truth about Canadian economy, that it's simply not safe for business. So even greater than the story of Alberta's flexibility is the story about Canada not being safe for business. And we're at the point now where the insecurity of financial projects in Canada mean there is no roadmap out of this for Canada. No amount of Carneyism, no amount of deep and divided world rhetoric, no amount of hysterical TDS scumbag boomers can fix this problem. Canada's reputation in the world is in the pits. It is all-time low, even amongst Canadians, even amongst Enbridge, who you can't get more plugged into Canada than Enbridge. If Enbridge is saying it's not safe for business, it means that no money will fix your problem, that no amount of lobbying can fix your problem. It is simply hard stop, not safe for business. So what does this story say for you guys in Alberta, and what does it say for Carney's prospects? What can Carney possibly do in this scenario?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing that he can do that doesn't run contrary to his goals of looting the country, right? So we're seeing the attack on both directions, where they're essentially trying to remove what meager property rights Canadians have.
I got a story for that coming up. Don't worry, I got that one too.
Those all the West Coast native bands, they will leverage to prevent this kind of expansion, right? Because we get some pipelines to the U.S. It puts Alberta in a much stronger economic position. If we had pipelines east and west, we would be a dominant energy power globally, and that's just something that Carney does not want.
I'm going to find that story. Oh yeah, it's my last one here. So yeah, that's here's our property rights. Nearly 80% of all land in British Columbia is currently in disputes with First Nations. 80% of British Columbia. I mean, I know people in the world have heard about how beautiful the Okanagan Valley are and how beautiful Vancouver is, but you don't really get it unless you're there. This is one of the most beautiful places in the world by far. There's nothing like it. The fresh air, the fertility, what's going on, just the energy. And it's almost dramatic how beautiful it is. It adds like literal drama to the scenario. And it's unique in Canada like that. We don't really have many places that are uniquely gorgeous. Montreal has its own drama. Maybe Quebec City is so pretty that it does have its own sort of unique charm, but that's not really a Canadian thing. It's not a beautiful urban landscape and rural landscape in general. It's a beautiful country, but it doesn't have these, it's not exactly that on every level. But the land they're talking about here is the postcard Canada, and apparently it's not even Canada. It's just some shithole.
Yeah, I mean, the nicest part of Canada starts like right behind me here. If not for the glare, you could see the Rocky Mountains in the background. And pretty much there to the coast is just amazing. And now we're being told that nobody owns that.
No, some Indian guy who was there a couple of years ago, when he was done with his cannibalism, he decided maybe it's also mine. So yeah, and then you go and look at indeed Carney's headwinds here financially. This report came out this week from TD, absolutely damning about what's happened since Trudeau and Carney between 2015 and 2024. More than $1 trillion Canadian trash tokens of investment have exited Canada, the largest capital exodus in Canadian history. For every dollar of inward foreign direct investment, $2 exited. So this is not a blip. This is a huge trend. And again, another thing that I just don't see Carney with his skill set being able to solve.
Carney has the skill set to cause this. This is directly caused by the actions of Mark Carney and Justin Trudeau, and Mark Carney through Justin Trudeau as the senior economic advisor to Justin Trudeau. This is the house that they built, right? The lack of rule of law, the idea that you can't necessarily be sure that if you follow all the rules and you go through and you get every possible permit and you still can't build what you're trying to build mid-project, like That's wild.
They
That's
can't even build houses. How many houses have they built? He said it was the greatest building since World War II. I remember many neighborhoods in my life that were World War II housing. We still have them here in Montreal. They underline them on the map because they're not as nice as, Montreal's a very beautiful city from a housing stock point of view. And our neighborhoods, I mean, to people in this generation, they look great, but we built a bunch of these salt box World War II housing neighborhoods, which we still call on the maps World War II housing neighborhoods, because they just don't fit in with the rest of the city. Most Canadians would crawl over broken glass to get into one of those today, but it's we see they kind of suck, and they're all over the country, but they haven't even done anything like that. I mean, they're not even close to having this kind of a build. The building is so bad because everyone's leaving. I mean, here's the other big story. It's not just the capital flight. Here's Prof. St. Onge, a leaver of Canada himself, someone who left. Nearly half of the most productive Canadians have fled to the United States, while third world immigrants make up 98% of Canada's own population growth. Population replacement is at warp speed. These numbers are catastrophic. Canadians in droves are fleeing a sinking ship. Canada is now 59 times more likely to live in the United States than an American in Canada. Again, that 10 years ago under the Harper government, it was pretty much a one-for-one swap of Americans coming in and Canadians going out. That's why you had that huge conversation last week at the Liberal convention that they're going to put an exit tax now on Canadians. Just think about how rock bottom stupid that is to begin with, because it's up to the Americans. I expect something else along these lines, and it's not what they're predicting. They can't control this. If American border authorities say Canadians who have a history of paying U.S. taxes, Canadians who have a history of being integrated into the American economy, because of the way the visas work, the very ones they're going to try and get you to pay 500,000 Canadian trash tokens for at the Liberal convention when they mentioned it. Those same visas aren't like the H-1B in the United States. They don't give Canadians residency status, so they don't count to becoming an American citizen. So if all Trump did was create a visa like the TN that actually counted towards Canadians becoming Americans, the rug pull would be absolutely catastrophic for Canada, because these Canadians would now start qualifying for permanent residency. We have easy access to temporary residency in the United States, actually a harder road than even most foreigners for permanent residency. Now, if that gets equaled out, which I expect it will, I think he's going full hog on this attack on Canada's human capital, because it's one of the fastest ways to rout Canada. So first of all, do you agree with my prediction that Trump is going to try and manipulate it? And I just want to hear your comments on the Liberal plan to charge Canadians $500,000 to leave.
Yeah, I mean, that's just that's something you'd expect from North Korea, or the former.
China does literally that. China does that. Right? China does that.
Yeah. So it's a communist tactic. It goes back to the concept that they think they own us. We're wage cattle to them.
Jesus, I hadn't thought of it that way. That's disgusting. Yeah.
And
you're right. Yeah.
That is how they look at us, and that's the only way that you can look at a tax like that. And why would I not have the freedom to leave? Is this a prison? Right?
It's a privilege to go somewhere.
Yeah, it's a privilege to leave. So the brain drain is very real already. Just out with my good friend Madex last night, and he was trying to convince me to leave. I am of the opinion that Alberta still has a very firm ground to stand on here, and that our path to sovereignty is real. And I think that if we achieve that sovereignty and we achieve our independence, the brain drain, if you think there's a brain drain going to the US, think about what the brain drain coming to Alberta will be.
Yeah, no, I continue to predict that Alberta is the richest country in the world the minute they signal distance from Canada and rapprochement to the United States. I think instantly Calgary will do to Toronto what Toronto did to Montreal 30 years ago. It will flip within 5 or 6 years. It'll become, and that's how quick it went for Montreal. The minute Montreal threatened Canada, we suffered big time, and it hollowed out the demographics. You know, it's what led to me being anti-Canadian, because I saw that Canada didn't give a shit about what happened to Anglophones in Quebec when they hollowed out the entire province. Now, I've come to appreciate Quebec and what they've been able to maintain, and the bulwark they are against Canadian federalism. And you know, I'm like you. I'm quite bullish on what we can achieve with Confederation gone. And again, I was looking at this real time graph on energy around the world, and you can just tell that Quebec and Alberta stand out on the continent. And there's no way this continent is going to shit in this time of peace. So I think it's a pretty safe bet to assume that these libtards, these shit libs, these Mark Carneys are going to absolutely fail, because there's no path for them to win. There's no counterforce that they can summon that is going to stop their losing. And I think it's just losing, losing money, losing talent, losing people. I mean, these are the images of Canada today, and this is just not appealing. This was just taken the other day in Toronto. Again, this is real, guys. This is happening. Now, the Canada I grew up in, this kind of a scene, no matter how shitty and poor Quebec got when the referendum stuff was happening, nothing looked like this. Nothing looked like this. Think of Canada and the harsh climate, and think of people trying to live like this. Now, the disgusting thing is, this scene you see here, I know this area really well. This was across the street from Decentral in Toronto, where we created the original Bitcoin co-working space, where the original Bitcoin ATM was, where Ethereum was launched, where Bitcoin Magazine was published in the early days. It opened in 2014 before any of this trouble. And the park, let me tell you, did not look like this. Okay. This was not what was happening back then. It was a beautiful park, beautiful. And now look at this. So, and there's a lot to be said there, because think about who was around back then. You know, forget about Vitalik for a second. All of us that were there in that early Bitcoin scene tried to talk the banks into embracing Bitcoin. You had Blockstream in Canada. You had Bull Bitcoin. You had the Bitcoin Embassy in Montreal. You had real human capital in Canada. Canada was punching way above its weight in early Bitcoin terms. And they all looked at us like we were fucking retards. And to this day, they won't give us the time of day or a meeting or anything, despite all of the positive affirmations all of us were able to conjure in the United States. You know, I left this shithole and went to New York. They treated me like a fucking god when I was there. Black car service, tell us about Bitcoin, every bank, limousines, come to the top floor, come to the top of this skyscraper. Jamie Dimon wants to know, Larry Fink wants to know. I knew they were scamming everyone on Bitcoin because of how many times I'd been to their office to answer questions for them between 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, regularly calling me in. And they weren't asking retarded questions. They were asking questions that signaled to me they knew what the fuck was going on. They were sending real people. And the Canadian banks, they don't care. This is what they created.
It's not that the Canadian banks don't care. The Canadian banks are a part of this machine, and the Canadian banks are the largest money laundering operation in the world, right? They are washing the money for the Chinese fentanyl trade. They're washing the money for the Mexican cartels. And, we've seen TD Bank get the largest fine ever not that long ago. And they're not changing that. And so the reason that Canadian banks are very wary of things like MSBs and the Bitcoin industry is because they are massive money laundering operations, and they don't want anything else bringing heat to their giant profitable money laundering operation. So
they don't want the attention.
When there are these small time companies dealing in things like Bitcoin, doing millions of dollars a year in volume, that's not interesting to them. You know, they want billions, they want trillions that the international drug smugglers do with them. And they really just don't want to touch anything that's like anything that could bring the eye of the almighty regulators down upon them. So
and we see that these guys are already bucking all of Carney's actions. Right here, we see Carney's banking friends are betting on Trump and saying no to Carney. Canada is in big trouble financially. The international banking scene is doing it. Canadian banks, even everyone's still making huge investments into the United States. It's not like they stopped. They take the money laundering profits and are investing in a worldview that is contrary to Carney's deep and divided world. Is this schism going to make any difference, or is Carney going to be able to keep looting despite the positive financial implications of not listening to Carney?
Yeah, I mean, there's like the rubber has to hit the road at some point, right? Like there can only be so many tent cities. There's only so much that you can loot, and there should be a tipping point somewhere for Canadians. My hope is that the tipping point has already been passed, and that we as Albertans will be leaving this mess. But where is the tipping point for all those Toronto boomers? Like, I don't know what has to change. If maybe them having to cut down their trip from 6 to 4 weeks is a big enough sacrifice, but they were able to ignore these tent cities, and we'll see how bad things have to get before these people start to wake up. And we're living in a country that elected Mark Carney. Like, that's insane.
Kind of elected him. And when I look at counter forces that they could use though for this, you look at this story, Time magazine, of course, nicknamed the George Clooney of finance. Who nicknamed him that? The George Clooney of finance. The propaganda is absolutely out of control. Mark Carney is the George Clooney of finance now, rock star, central banker. What is going on? But again, this is Time magazine. This just looks like weak sauce. I mean, I don't think this can work anymore. This is what they tried 10 years ago in the Rolling Stone coverage of Trudeau. I can't imagine it working again. Can you? Is this really going to go anywhere? Is this a thing?
It's really hard to say. There are there's all these plays from the sort of like early 2000s propaganda playbook that the left still keeps recycling, and they don't seem to grasp that they don't hit the way that they used to hit. And they keep trying them, and they keep thinking they're fooling everyone still, but fewer and fewer people are fooled all the time. So I think to most people this just looks retarded, honestly. It's like,
well, hold on, this looks retarded, but wait till you get a load of this. Opinion. This isn't a Carney majority. It's a national unity government. Are you feeling the unity, bro? How together are we that Carney has his majority mandate? Are we all just like, wow, this is going to save Canada? And this is from Justin Ling, a real fucking scumbag. Like, just a disgusting human being. I expect some kind of scandal involving this guy someday. That looks, pizza party-ish, because I've seen this guy in action. Really, really, really vile human being. And here he is in the Toronto Star going with this story that it's not a majority. It's national unity, bro. It's going great.
I don't feel very unified because I didn't get my bribe.
Yeah, the bribe would have helped.
The bribes have not been coming to this end of the country, unfortunately. So I imagine Justin Ling got his. He works for the Toronto Star, so he's got a
$30K a year in trash tokens given to him.
Yeah, exactly. He's got a direct line into the money printer, and so
all it takes,
where the incentives sit there.
Imagine 30 grand can get you to write a fucking trash article like this. 30 grand is all it takes to get you to write something that will exist forever on the internet. Like, imagine writing this, because here's the story that I see with the floor crossings, where I think, he might have flew a little too close to the sun, because Rolling Stone, it's Christine Lagarde wrote that article in Time magazine, and then Toronto Star, you can't really expect much better from them. But it looks like the floor crossing has indeed caused a equal and opposite reaction. You are seeing a bit of questioning of him in the Canadian fake legacy news. Globe and Mail writing opinion, the odd floor crossing is one thing, but on this scale, it undermines our system of government. You've also got Andrew Coyne, one of the worst cases of Trump derangement syndrome in the world, coming out here and actually nailing it, saying that it stinks, that it's a problem, that the floor crossings really do undermine Canadian democracy. Do you see this argument? Do you see, first of all, two questions. Do you see the argument that that floor crossing itself is going to catch on as a frame? And do you think that Carney has actually lost the ability to manipulate the legacy media ubiquitously and uniformly? Will there start to be some cracks in the fake news and how they report on them now that he has the majority? Now that ultimately, and you saw the Bloc Québécois say this the other day, he wanted to run the negotiations with the United States. He wanted all this stuff to get the majority. He can't make excuses anymore. There's no more excuses. He has everything he needs. And I think he used the word toolbox. He used tools that didn't even really exist to get what he wanted. And now here he is. So ultimately, there is this full accountability. So two questions. Is the floor crossing going to create this perpetual criticism? And can the fake news now have enough elbow room to criticize him?
Yeah. I mean, the toolbox is full of cash, obviously, right? So that is the toolbox, is bribes. And it absolutely undermines our system of democracy. It's like, even without the bribes, it would undermine our system of democracy. But the fact that he's paying people to cross the floor, and he is, I'm saying it again, very clearly paying these people. If that's not true, you should sue me.
Let's go, sue him.
Let's go.
We want to sue him.
It's very clear that the floor crossings do undermine our democracy, because when these MPs were elected, they were elected on the premise that they were part of a different party, right? Most of what someone votes for when they vote in the Canadian elections, we vote for our MPs technically, but really you're voting for the party, you're voting for the leader.
Mm-hmm.
And now all of the people who voted for a Conservative or an NDP MP have had their votes basically invalidated. Mm-hmm. So it's a massive blow to democracy. It's part of why I say we've probably had our last elections, because there is no respect for the concept of democracy and the election system that underpins it. And I think this is ubiquitous. This is not just a liberal issue. This is something from the entire political class that has no respect for the underlying principles of, what are supposed to be democracy underpinning our federation here. And so, yeah, I think that's the end. I think that's the end of our democracy. But as that goes, like, we're still going to see little bits of media that call out things like that, but they're going to be few and far between. They're sort of LARPing their role as the media. They're supposed to be holding the government to account, and they'll mention something small like that, but we're not going to see.
They won't talk about the consequences.
Yeah, we're not going to see the consequences of that. And like the rational thing, in a functioning democracy with an actual free press that is actually working to hold this government to account, the government wouldn't have survived 150 of the scandals that Trudeau had, right? Any one of these scandals could bring down most world leaders. This floor crossing should invalidate the entire government. It should be causing such an uproar that the government should have they should have no choice but to call an election over this. Mm-hmm. If we had a press that was actually fulfilling their duties to the public, then the uproar for this stolen majority government should be so massive that they have no choice. But mentioning it is better than not mentioning it. But it's still horrible.
Well, somewhere on if you go look in the archives of Toronto Star, you'll see a quote from me on election night 2011. I was one of the only local candidates that had made national news, and I was not one of the candidates they expected to win my riding, but I still managed to make news and all these things. And so I got a call election night asking me what I thought, And I said, look, that's the Canadian system. They choose party. We don't choose individuals. We all understood in the Canadian system that an individual candidate can make about 5% difference if it's really, you work really hard. And, I probably got, a couple extra thousand votes for all of my publicity stunts and all the things that I did that were a lot of fun. And I had my own campaign platform, that was different than the national platform. And there was a tiny bit of error between us. And so I went on record that night and said, look, the Quebecers chose the NDP party. It had nothing to do with my loss. I don't take it personally. That's the Canadian system. And what we got here was, the Quebecers believing it. But like you said, the amount of scandals that would have destroyed other governments. I mean, just look at it. They never had to face these questions. The Conservative government, Harper's government, died because of the ridiculous Senate spending scandal that nobody even remembers the details because it was so stupid and boring. It was $100,000 of Swiss Chalet rotisserie chicken ordered by Fat Mike Duffy. And then the chief of staff paid off the bill because it was embarrassing. And they made it sound like it was influence peddling, that the chief of staff, who just literally gave him $100K and said, get out of here. I don't want to answer any of these questions, to a senator who doesn't even really have a choice in voting as it is. Like, they can make him vote one way or the other for free. They don't need to pay him off. And everyone's like, oh, it's influence peddling. They can make him vote the way they want. That's free in Canada. Senators do not have full discretion. Maybe on paper they do, but technically they do not. And so they turned that into enough of a scandal. Remember, no money lost to the Canadian taxpayer, not a dollar. And some questions about the discretion of one senator when they already had a majority in the Senate and didn't need him. They turned that into a national scandal and were able to completely destroy the Harper government and meme the Trudeau government into power. So pathetic examples, but that's what happened, and that's why the country is just simply not going to make it. And again, it's not like any of the people he's got to floor cross are going to make the case for him. Now I didn't mean to insult her and call her a swamp donkey and fat shame her and stuff last week, so I take it all back this week. I'm not going to call her a swamp donkey this week. I'm not going to draw attention to her looks at all. It was mean of me last week to do that. But here she is trying to, I guess, appease the Liberal Party. It was her maiden speech, and Ezra Levant put it perfectly, saying, I just can't imagine abasing myself like this. I'm dying inside for her. A total repudiation of everything she's ever said and done for a seat in the Liberal backbench and 30 seconds of fame. What an eternal disgrace. And the thing is, neither side respects her. And indeed, I mean, she's not going to be a help to Carney to make the case. It's not like she's going to be a bright shining star in the floor crossers and people are going to be like, wow, it was really worth it. They're going to take one look, these Liberals, and I know them because they're all from Montreal and they're all from Toronto. They're going to take one look at this fucking woman's buck teeth and her hair, and they're going to say, why are we listening to this fucking bitch?
I also regret that you called her a swamp donkey.
Yeah, it was mean of me. I take it back.
I think it's uncalled for. We shouldn't refer to her as a swamp donkey again.
No, I won't.
But she's rich now.
How rich?
I don't know.
We don't know. Nobody knows.
I mean, the scope of their evil and incompetence is so great that it might be as simple as having $10 million deposited into her bank account. There might be a very obvious, stupid trail like that, but we'll probably never know. And it would be pretty trivial for her to be paid into an offshore account or, Bitcoin, Ether. I bet she's paid in Ether. I bet you that's what happened.
Stop saying swamp donkey in the chat, guys. It's not nice. I told you I'm not doing that again. I'm not doing it. It's not nice at all.
No,
she's
swamp donkey is
a lovely person.
It's a rude term to call her a swamp donkey.
Rude. It's rude. God,
yeah,
it's rude. Indeed. And Johnny Midas, swamp donkeys rule. Exactly. They rule. They're the best. So that's what she's got going on. Now, indeed, you see him here, Carney, he can't handle the questions. He can't handle the heat. He can't make up a conversation on the fly about the erosion of trust and democracy. If this little soundbite is any indication, the body language is crazy. You're getting the cognitive dissonance, the word salad, the uhs. it doesn't look like he's got the skill set or the toolbox in order to stop this. But the good news, while all this goes on, we see the Conservatives fail this way, and then you look at the by-elections that happened this week. Of course, the Conservatives completely wiped out. That was the biggest story. It wasn't even the majority, which was in the bag for the Liberals. The big story is the collapse of Conservative voters in the by-elections. Way, way down, zero motivation to oust anybody or belief that it was going to happen. So University Rosedale, 14,000 down to 3. Scarborough, complete and total wipeout. Terrebonne, non-existent. So what I see here is really the beginning of the story of Alberta sovereignty, because if the Conservatives can't be in opposition, that really was the vehicle that Alberta used in order to try and level the playing field with Ottawa. If that's evaporated, if Alberta's, goodwill to create links to suburban Toronto, to working class blue collar Ontarians, if that gets severed in the way that it clearly looks like it's been severed, there's no more ties that bind Canada together, I don't think, because the Conservatives aren't going to be that vehicle anymore. Is this the story of Alberta separation right here, the collapse in Conservative by-election support?
Yeah, I mean, kind of, but it's also, I think, part of the whole floor crossing thing. Like, what's the point of voting for a Conservative? Like, if you vote Conservative, you might just end up with a Liberal MP.
But I was told that all the great podcast appearances on Joe Rogan would make them get behind him. Are you telling me that the Joe Rogan appearance 3 weeks ago did not translate into Conservative by-election support?
I can't even guess what Poilievre is doing, what he's doing, or why. I think it's time to pack it in, frankly.
Yeah.
The
Get a real job.
Party of Canada should fold.
Yeah.
And give up. It's not a conservative country as long as we have the Laurentian elites controlling things and paying people to cross the floor and buying a majority government. Like, there's no point in having a Conservative Party at this point.
Mm-hmm. So they're the biggest failures of it. And now my last story for you, just hearsay, just rumors, but I think it might be true. Coming from Jeffrey Rath, so that takes down some of its credibility. But here he is saying, I just received a call from a Stelco employee in Hamilton, Ontario. That person advised me that he was present when Mark Carney visited the Stelco steel plant in Hamilton, Ontario, March 29th, 2026. They advised that when Mark Carney was asked what he would do in the face of Alberta independence vote, Mark Carney replied that there will be no Alberta independence because I'll invoke the Emergencies Acts, the old martial law they used to sick on us during the truckers' protest. This was not reported by any mainstream media news outlet who were present. It demonstrates that Mark Carney has zero respect for the rule of law and the Constitution of Canada, the Supreme Court of Canada, or the Parliament of Canada. This should surprise no one. So first of all, do you believe the story? Not that it matters. And do you believe this is the approach they're going to take?
I mean, their approach to forming government shows you that there is no line that is too far to cross. There's no right and wrong that matters here to these people. There's just power and success. And so, they want to continue to spend the wealth of Alberta, and they will use whatever dirty tricks they can to continue to have access to that wealth. So, yeah, I expect the Emergencies Act. I expect every dirty trick in the book, and I do not expect them to negotiate reasonably or in good faith if we do have a successful referendum. And I hope we just don't waste too much time with that, because while Trump is in power, we have the ability, once we have that vote, to unilaterally declare our independence without the consent of Canada and tell them to go fuck themselves. Have the Emergencies Act in Canada all you want. It's not happening in Alberta because it's no longer in Canada.
And you just know that Trump is dying to get involved in this fight and support Alberta. And you can just tell this is his, because it's like light mischief. He went out in Iran. He's not afraid of no bee's nest in Canada. He went into Iran, into that bee's nest, and we have peace. I do believe it is going to be a lasting peace. I mean, I might be wrong, but I think the amount of action he's taken against the city of London and all the bloodsuckers and the vampires means that he can really legitimately win this fight and re-anchor the world in American prosperity and an American exceptionalism. And I see the world turning to that. I see Scott Bessent and what he's doing. He's already punching out the new Fed chair. He already punched him in the face yesterday. You know, America's got a big gay Patton sitting in the Treasury, just punching out anyone he doesn't like and beating up all kinds of people. And he's going to subordinate that Federal Reserve. It's going to have to suck the big Bessent cock, it looks like. And Bessent is going to reinstitute this American system. And wouldn't they love these oil flows coming into the American balance sheet? Wouldn't they love this addition? Wouldn't they love to take over Canada? So they're going to support Alberta in every way possible. I believe there's no impropriety or politeness that's going to stop them. I think they're coming, they're waiting. And when I hear, and I don't know if it's true that Carney said that at a Stelco meeting, but it would be like him to say it because he's so disrespectful of the media and of being questioned and has these glib answers all the time, that I do think this scenario could have happened. It does sound reasonable to me. I don't have proof. It's hearsay from, second degree hearsay. But indeed, I do see a world where America is Alberta's absolute and total best friend here when it comes to any type of Emergencies Act and martial law being declared. So indeed, I don't think it'll ever happen.
Yeah. It's just the path to the end of Canada, and we're on it.
Oh, isn't it fun? Isn't it fun? Aren't we having a good time? Aren't we having a great time here? The Canadian apocalypse in full flight. You're going to love my book, man. You're going to love my book. It's got all the Bitcoin memes you need to survive. It's don't trust, verify, proof of work, stay humble, stack sats, sovereign individual. The Bitcoin memes are there, and they can help people survive what is going to be a historic failure of a fiat nation, maybe the first fiat nation to go down the tubes. That'll be Canada. But the good news is Canadian provinces will be better off when that stinking pile of shit dies. And we can't wait for it to happen. So there you go. I appreciate your time today, Dave.
Thank you for having me.
It's always the best, my man. All right. So we'll see you again next week, my man.
Bye.
Peace. All right, folks, that brings us to the end of our, whoops, let me stop the screen share. Stop the screen share. Stop. Now what happened? Bring me back. Where am I? Back. Huh? There I am. Nope. Don't know why that is happening the way it is. Let me try another screen share. We got a glitch, guys. We got a glitch here. I'm going to re-screen share. Oh, no. I don't know what this is now. You're done. Well, I don't think it's going to let me end the show as I had intended with the screen shares. It's just erasing me, which I can't understand. But that's okay. Stop. No. Simply not working. There I am. And I'm back. But I can only get on half a screen. I can't get rid of that screen. Oh, maybe this works. Hold on. Hide. There we go. There we go. That worked. No idea why that happened. All right, folks. I appreciate all your time today on this afternoon. Happy Friday, says Fiat Apocalypse. Swamp Scale Breaker, Swamp Yeti, Marsh Donkey. Those are all mean. We're not calling her any of those names, guys. Come on. Come on. Now you're fat shaming Johnny Midas. Jesus, guys. I'm hoping you don't do that. Now you're out here calling her a swamp donkey. I don't know. I don't know, guys. I'm so glad I moved to Alberta last year, says have fun staying poor. AB 51 or bust. Please, people have no idea how much actual independence would cost. Have fun paying for military directly. Indeed. Tariffs, they're screwed, man. Don't worry. They're in big, big trouble. You're going to see Alberta A happy, happy place. Lee J saying the gas is already cut with water. Hindu grade, I believe that. So, folks, indeed, I'm going to let my producer know I'm about to end the broadcast. And then I will end the broadcast. I think that brings us to the end of our live news coverage this weekend here at Roxham, or this week in Roxham. Thanks, everyone who tuned in to Roxham TV this week. It was a historic and amazing week of news. Lots of breaking news here on the network, lots of fun conversations, lots of change, right? It's not easy to find a news network that's covering change like we do and that has their finger on the pulse of all this change. We're in the middle of all of it. So for all of you who have watched either just this show or all my shows this week, I appreciate it a lot. Thank you. I'm about to play the logo and it'll be followed by the thanks for watching screen. Thanks for watching, folks. Have a great weekend. See ya Monday morning, everybody.